Good morning, everybody. This is Jeff J. Brown in beautiful, noisy, jackhammer crazy Shenzhen, just south of the Tropic of Cancer, for another China Rising Radio Sinoland article and podcast. Again, as usual, it will really make it worth your. It will be more rewarding if you get the source article, which I will include with the YouTube and SoundCloud postings. So that you can get all the hyperlinks and visuals, which are very important in this particular installment. Today's article is entitled China versus the West, Another Shocking Comparative Vignette. And it shows a picture of Harvey Weinstein and Bill Clinton with juxtaposed with a propaganda poster in China a photograph I took. And the byline says, above, top row, known sexual perverts and predators Harvey Weinstein on the left and Bill Lolita Island Clinton on the right. Our elites cultivate early on susceptible pawns like this, who are then promoted, blackmailed, extorted, and when need be, entrapped and then used in mainstream propaganda as identity politics poster boys to keep the people's eyes off the fact that they are getting fleeced by their owners. Bottom is propaganda Beijing style, Baba Beijing style, inspiring the people to be model citizens. These are what I call the 12 virtues of communism, discussed below. As chapter 2 to my last article and podcast, here is a comparative vignette that just slaps me in the face. I hope it wakes you up too. Living and working in China is what helps me bring it all into focus. Oftentimes, without an outside reference to compare something to, it's hard to appreciate its significance. 3 Americans now own more wealth than the bottom 160 million citizens combined. For the world, it's 8 people who have as much wealth as the bottom 3,700,000,000. That's a lot of zeros. This ever-increasing upward vacuuming of planet Earth's human and natural resources will not stop until there is a global revolution for a just and equitable socialist system. Each country must find their path away from psychopathic capitalism, the last 2 words being a tautology. It's the ineluctable logic of capitalism which Karl Marx wrote about 150 years ago. But most citizens in North America, Britain, Australia, and New Zealand are ignorant of this fact, since his writings are almost non-existent in libraries and schools. This is a little less true in Western Europe. Marx, Lenin, and Mao were also right. Unless Americans and eventually the rest of Euranglo land mobilize, in a few years it will be 180 million in the right-hand column, then 200 million in the U.S., and on and on. Europe is catching up fast. Concurrently, it will be 4 billion, 4.5 billion, etc. for all of humanity. How long can this continue? It's a serious question worthy of your contemplation and discussion. Happily, you can leave China out of this abysmal Western house of horrors. Baba Beijing is keenly aware of what's going on in the U.S., with the UK hot in America's tracks, and Europe about a generation behind on its copycat treadmill to a dystopian future. I've talked to a number of Communist Party of China officials, it's abbreviated CPC. They lose sleep over something like this happening in Sinoland, which is why they have an official target of bringing the country's Gini index, G-I-N-I index, to below 0.40 and trending downward. I wrote about this in book number 3 of the China trilogy, China is Communist, Damn It, Dawn of the Red Dynasty, analyzing historical and global trends. President Xi even talked about the Gini index in his recent 19th Party Congress speech. How many other countries have brought 800 million people out of poverty since 1949? How many Western nations are adding 10,000 citizens to its middle class every day? Or in reality, capitalist countries are sucking how many thousands of their citizens out of the middle class and down into poverty on a daily basis? How many other governments besides China's are obsessed about the Gini index and follow through by passing laws and policies to lower it? How many other world leaders are fanatical about not just reducing, but eliminating poverty in their countries, and actually doing so in record time? China's communist socialist leaders proverbially keep these goals taped to their bathroom mirrors for motivation every morning when they wake up. Then they go to work for their people. Mao Zedong said it over and over, and Xi Jinping is saying it, and every other Chinese leader in between chanted, "Serve the people." Below is a screenshot that Joseph Lee, hailing from Canada, posted on the China Rising Radio Sinoland WeChat forum. It is a graph from a Taiwanese TV show called 57 Gold Money Explosion. It shows the change in income of the U.S.'s richest 10% versus the bottom 90% from 1949 to 2012. I shouldn't have to tell you which group is blue and which is the red. Notice that the West red owners have been getting richer since 1949, immediately after World War II, and you blue peasants increasingly poorer ever since. Sorry to break it to you, but nothing's changed for 500 years of Western colonial imperialism. The elites regurgitate just enough crumbs to keep the masses from revolting, and when the downtrodden finally get to cut off a few diamond-bedecked heads, the surviving elites hand out some extra tidbits for a generation, then start to claw it all back, and then more. Bingo! Your post-war economic history lesson in a nutshell. Do you notice the precipitous drop for the poor blues, 1982 to 1990? That was U.S. President Ronald Reagan's glorious "everybody is going to get rich" trickle-down tax cut on the wealthy from 70% to 28%. It was 63 to 94% from 1932 to 1964 and 70% from then until 1982. Our owners still owned us, drank champagne, and ate caviar on their yachts, but it's never enough for capitalists. They want it all. See how it went up a little 1991 to 2000? That's when phony liberal triangulator U.S. President Bill Clinton raised it to 36 to 39.6%, but gave Wall Street the license to rape the people and steal their already diminishing wealth by signing into law NAFTA in 1993, WTO in 1994, and repealing 1993's Glass-Steagall Act in 1999. Then came U.S. Presidents George Bushy Boy and Barack Obama, who really put capitalism's steel-toed jackboot on the citizens' throats by lowering the tax rates again while hyperventilating Clinton's slashing of social, education, medical, and other life-sustaining safety nets for the poor and the middle class. Predictably, starting about 2009, Americans went into negative income growth. Remember Margaret Thatcher's elitist mantra, "There is no alternative"? Abbreviated TINA, it means austerity, deprivation, and impoverishment for low-income and working people. Then our owners use their own written tax laws and social budget cuts to transfer these poor suckers' wealth to millionaires and billionaires. Nice work if you can get it and are a venal psychopath. This Taiwanese TV program was arguing that U.S. President Donald Trump's new proposed windfall tax cuts on the super rich will not benefit Joe and Jane Sixpack. Well, duh! But this law will likely pass, as well as all other Western austerity for the poor, quote, legislation, end of quote, because capitalists, or the elites if you still can't bring yourself to say that word, always end up subsuming their, quote, electoral, end of quote, systems and governments to their control and manipulation. Be sure and tell Westerners that Marx, Lenin, and Mao told them so, since they have a hard time finding their books. Colonialism, capitalism, and the Industrial Revolution all coalesced 15th to the 20th centuries, and now with globalization, humanity's destruction is increasing exponentially. In the graph above, this is only for income. If you calculated net worth, assets like real estate, stocks, bonds, precious metals, commodities, cash in the bank, creditor loans, etc., less debt, this graph would be even more grotesquely skewed in favor of the 10%. You'd have to find the 90%'s wealth with a magnifying glass. It's the 90% who are neck deep in debt to the 10%. This dynamic hasn't changed in thousands of years either. Recall Jesus Christ courageously overturning the bankers' tables in the temples shortly before he was killed. Muhammad declared that banks could not charge interest on loans. Usury is an age-old elitist phenomenon. Negative income starting in 2009 means the dystopian Hunger Games are now on Americans' horizon. In George Orwell's 1984, it was called Oceania. Similar plots and backdrops. Same difference. If Americans and Westerners don't start speaking truth to imperial power, they and their children are staring at a future in advanced capitalist hell. And then there's a photograph taken out of the one of the Hunger Games movies. Excuse me, I'm going to take a sip from, and it's not tea today, it's actually Yunnan province mountain coffee. You know, Yunnan, Shangri-La, Tiger Leaping Mountain, Dali, Lijiang, and all that. All right, and the byline for this photograph from one of the Hunger Game movies is, "The West is declining into failed capitalist states, joining so many countries already suffering under empire's tyranny across the Americas, Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and Oceania." Pictured above is an outtake from the Hunger Games movies, Hell on Earth, streaming live from the silver screen right into your lives. In the meantime, China's 1,370,000,000 citizens are already living a positive vision of shared justice and equality. The future is bright, which is why it's such a pleasure to live here. It's called the Communist Socialist Chinese Dream, and it's working for the 90% and the 10%. President Xi also stated in his 19th Congress speech that China's 10% will be expected to give back more to the rest of society, since it is, after all, that very communist socialist economic system which allowed them to get so rich in the first place. China's 10% wealthy class can look forward to a big haircut. In fact, it's already happening. Talk about following through on your promises to the people. A mere 24 hours after the conclusion of China's 19th Party Congress, it was announced that the days of rampant speculation and profiteering in the country's overheated property market are over, as spelled out in this article referenced. Thanks to author Wei Ling Chua for sending this to me. It's in Chinese, so use an online translator as needed. Baba Beijing will undoubtedly use the world's largest number of fastest supercomputers, big data applications, artificial intelligence, and other information tools to connect the dots between speculators and their straw men's home and apartment purchases across the entire country. Way too much residential property is sitting empty in China, just waiting for price appreciation to make a killing in the process. It's irrational because naked speculation is capitalism on methamphetamine, and Baba Beijing is fed up. This while the government is building millions of low-income and subsidized housing for those in need. It wants to close this loop between the people's needs and this ridiculous capitalist bubble going on in residential property. Another tautology, capitalist bubble. Other laws and targeted taxes are surely going to hit China's privileged class. Baba Beijing says it's time to eradicate poverty and drop that Gini index way down. It takes progressive tax laws, hard-nosed regulations, and life-saving social safety nets to make these dreams come true. I can hear the CPC sharpening its collective sheep shears right now. Bzzz. And then there's a picture of a sheep that's literally been shorn on only one side. And the byline says, in the capitalist West, above is shown a middle-class citizen. In communist socialist China, it's a rich person. And that, my friends, makes all the difference. This while the West's capitalist owners have brainwashed their vassal citizens with centuries of fake news, divisive identity and race politics, bogus statistics, rigged markets, propaganda, false flags, imperial wars and conquest. Here's a conversation between the 10% and the 90%. The 10%, it is our divine right that we shear you miserable deplorables like sheep. Get over here right now, boy. The 90%, yes, sir, massa. Whatever you say, boss man. I can get a 4th part-time job and live in my car. It's the least I can do. I can't afford to see a doctor or buy medicine anyway. God bless America. We're number one. It is going to continue to spiral up for the former and down for the latter until Americans in particular and Westerners in general start taking action. But they have to wake up from their propaganda hypnosis in order to do so. All of this sexual assault crap saturating the mainstream Western media recently is just more imperial pixie dust to blind the people while their owners continue to fleece them. It is very methodical, orchestrated, and contrived brainwashing. Between all the absurd, quote, mass murder, end of quote, false flags. What was that last eyewash? Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Last month it was gender identity. And the month before that it was Russiagate. And the month before that it was Hillarygate. And the month before that it was gay marriage. And the month before that it was Wikigate and unisex toiletgate, abortiongate, red state, blue state itis, gun control OSIS, that fake terrorist and that imaginary shooter and gate, and mark my word, in December they'll launch that hoary seasonal chestnut. Dreaded others are trying to take Christmas away from us. As always, powerful undercurrents of racism and xenophobia are used to keep this poisonous propaganda pot boiling, noxious hatred and fear in the public consciousness. Give me China's wall-to-wall communist socialist propaganda, which is everywhere I turn. It is positive and uplifting, meant to inspire the citizens to lead better lives, practicing noble ideas like democracy, harmony, friendship, justice, equality, hard work, and rule of law. These are 7 of what I call the 12 virtues of communism. Officially, they are called the core socialist values. The other 5 are patriotism, prosperity, trust, freedom, and civilization. Imagine living in a society where the government, media, and education promote high-minded citizenship. I do. Frank Scott brilliantly satirized the West's 3-card Monty, quote, propaganda brainwash scam playbook, end of quote. His reference to Jesus Christ is very apropos. For millennia, the elites have been perfecting this shell game into a scientific art form. Mr. Scott's last line about, quote, the next lawsuit, end of quote, is right on target for the upcoming pixie dust propaganda scandal campaign with a mass shooting false flag or 2 thrown in to keep the bejesus scared out of the masses. Be fearful, be very, very fearful, because they are everywhere. How much longer will Western citizens let their faces be throttled in the muck? How much more dignity will they have to lose before they snap and, with inspiration from Fannie Lou Hamer, shout out, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I'm not going to take it anymore. Enough is enough. It is a question for the ages, and the elites, pumping out blinding clouds of preposterous false flags and propaganda, are working overtime to keep it from being answered. All of this is thoroughly discussed in fascinating detail in book number 2 of the China trilogy, China Rising, Capitalist Roads, Socialist Destinations. Learn how the world really works. The great Canadian rock group Guess Who had a worthy riposte to this old question in their acerbic put-down of capitalism's holy avatar, the United States, which they made into a female allegory in 1970's American Woman. There is a great studio cut and a gritty live version on offer below. Somewhere in between the studio and the stage, lead singer Burton Cummings got a different kind of haircut than the one Baba Beijing is giving its rich Chinese. Enjoy listening, reflect, and then hopefully have the courage to discuss. This is Jeff J. Brown, China Rising Radio Sinoland, signing out from Shenzhen, China.